Well, everyone, thank you. Welcome, and thanks for joining our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm marketing operations here at Smarty. Today's webinar is about setting up US Address Autocomplete API to autofill your forms. And we're really excited to show you this step-by-step process of how we get that done. However, before I introduce our presenter, allow me to go over a few housekeeping items. One, this webinar will be recorded. We will be sending out a copy of this recording to everybody who registered, so you can be looking for that in your email in the following days. This also means that if you need to step out early for one reason or another, you'll be able to catch up on that recording. And if you'd like to share this recording with someone, you'll be welcome to do that. Second, to interact with our presenter and other audience members, feel free to use the chat and the questions features in the Zoom webinar interface. We also have our own Wes Arnold, our product marketing manager, in the wings, and he'll be ready to take your questions. And of course, we'll bring some of your questions up to our presenter during the Q&A and throughout the session. So speaking of our presenter, today we have Dave Hale, a front-end engineer with us, and we're very excited to hear what he's going to share. So without further ado, Dave Hale, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and you can go ahead and share yours.
Okay, great. Before I start sharing, I just wanted to introduce myself. As Andrew mentioned, I'm Dave Hale. I am a front-end engineer here at Smarty. I have a wife, 4 kids, and a dog, and I love to code. We're going to cover the US Address Autocomplete SDK and also the API. Let me just go over some of the differences. With the SDK, it has many pre-built capabilities that you install as an NPM package. It includes more than just US Address Autocomplete. It contains US address verification, international address verification, US zip code, address extraction from arbitrary text. So lots of good stuff there. The API, on the other hand, it just lets you pinpoint exactly what services you need to work with. Some of the reasons why you might choose one over the other. The SDK is typically easier to set up and work with. It's better for novice developers. The API, on the other hand, is typically leaner and it has a smaller footprint. You can implement it without an NPM installation, and it's great if you want to use your own code. With regard to questions, we'll try to answer them as best as we can. If a question requires more discussion than we have time to address, contact our support department or consult our website, and also Wes Arnold is, like we said, in the wings. We'll be doing all of our work today in JavaScript. So today we're going to build 2 demos, and each one will be done in plain JavaScript. We'll only have enough time to build out basic functionality, and we'll send you the links to both of the finished demos. We'll be using ES6 JavaScript with arrow functions, template strings, array maps, destructuring, the spread operator, optional chaining, event handlers, DOM manipulations, basically some really fun stuff. In the interest of time, I will be copy pasting blocks of code and then explaining the code block rather than just doing the type along. And then if you're a React or a Vue or an Angular or whatever flavor developer you are, you should still be able to get something out of this. And you'll likely see your framework or library of choice where it could streamline what you're about to see. So with that, I'll begin sharing my screen and we'll start doing some code. Okay, so.
Looks excellent. I see your browser.
Awesome. That was the next question I was going to ask. So this is what we're going to build for the SDK. And this is just a sample address input and where we should see some suggestions. So I'll just start typing in here and look at that. We're getting some suggested addresses. Great. So to get started with that, I'm going to create a new sandbox. Oh, and I should also show you which bit of documentation we'll be covering. So you go to resources and then you go to SDK references, since we're going to build the SDK version, and you go to JavaScript SDK. So this next bit of coding is going to be following this outline for the most part. We're going to be using codesandbox.io. So to do that, I'm just going to go to a new one here, codesandbox.io. And I'm going to create a new sandbox. I'm going to do vanilla JavaScript. And it's going to load. I guess because I'm on a Zoom meeting, things are always a little slower. How embarrassing. All right, good. Patience prevails. So I'm going to remove this. Well, before I do, I want to make sure everything's running. Yep. So this is the running window. This is our code window. So I'm going to remove this bit. And I'm going to remove that bit. And I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to grab some code that I told you I was going to copy paste earlier. Grab that. Replace it with that. And you're going to start seeing some stuff start to appear. Get my styles out, paste those in, save everything. Okay, now we've got basically a boilerplate where it really doesn't do anything yet. So let me see these pages too. We're going to spend most of our time working on the JavaScript area here. Okay, so everything's saved, ready to go. So back to the documentation. The first step that it's going to say is we need to get an NPM package. Because we're using code sandbox, I can't really do command line NPM installs, but not to worry. I can come down here to the dependency and I can say I want the Smarty Streets. Our previous name, we're now Smarty. So we're still renaming things because it just happened like a week ago when we changed our name. So this is the JavaScript SDK. So now I have that dependency, which is the same step as doing an NPM install. Easy peasy. So now I'm going to come down here to look at some code examples, and I'm going to go to using US Autocomplete Pro. It's going to pull up our our GitHub repo, and I'm just going to grab all of this code right here using the copy function. Go back to my window, and here I am in JavaScript. Before I do that, though, I forgot to get some boilerplate that I wanted to get in here also. So I'm going to do 2 copies here. Okay, let me explain what's going on here first. So we have 2 get element by IDs in JavaScript to pull out the address input, which is this guy here in HTML, and the suggestion box. So that's basically all I'm doing. And then I'm wiring up an event listener for the key up event. And I'm going to send this prepare request function the value of whatever I typed in the address. And that's going to show up in the window. This is just a temporary little bit here to show that it's actually working. So if I start typing, oh, probably should save it and refresh. Not that save. There we go. There we go. Yep, now it's just repeating everything that I said. That tells me that my add event listener is all wired up. Okay, now back to the GitHub repo. Got to recopy this back to my screen, and I'm going to replace this with a bunch of code, and it's barking at me because it's using a async await. So to fix that, all I really have to do is go to the top of my prepare request function and plug in an async. There we go. So that clears that up, and I'm going to just do a save here, and it should pretty this up and indent properly. So everything's now plugged in. Let's make sure that I have the next bit of code here to copy and paste in. I think, yeah, I think I'm all caught up. Now, the next little bit is now we're just going to kind of look over what the SDK gives us. We have the key here, which I have to go and get. So I'm going to come over here to my embedded keys. Oh, and by the way, no, not to panic here. This is not like private, secure information. This is something that it's all publicly available when it's presented on the web. So not to worry. So I'm going to create a new key, and my host name has to match with the environment that I'm in. So I'm going to copy that and plug it into my account. And I'm going to say, yep, I got my account. And I'm going to make sure that really does match. Yes, okay, good. So let's copy this now over to my code. Plug that in. Now what you just saw me erase there is the way you would do it if you're doing something with Node, pulling that out of the process environment. We don't want anyone to save their keys into their GitHub repos or just their Git repos. That's not secure, but anyway, you'll want to do it through like an import statement if you're doing it through some kind of a bundler. Now we're passing lookup value into this prepare request, which comes from here. So now our lookup value, whatever I typed in the address, is now coming in. And we're setting up the credentials here. Plugs in the key that I just entered. There's our client builder and the client, and then the lookup. Now there's some hard-coded stuff here. We don't want to look up a hard-coded address every time. We want to look up the dynamic address that comes from the address. So that's now lookup value. And that matches up with what I just passed in to the function. And now it's going to handle the request. It's going to look it up. Oh wait, this is the, sorry, these are two additional demonstrations that we really aren't going to go over. It just shows some of the additional features that you can do with like preferred states or other things that you might want to filter on. So now we're all wired up to now log the suggestions to the console. So I'm going to open the console up here and save my JavaScript and refresh the page. Now I'm going to start typing. And I got suggestions. It's actually talking to the Smarty API right now. And you can see that it's pulling up 1, 2, 3, 4, and all these other suggestions will have similar addresses for suggestions. Well, that's great that we're talking to the backend API right now. We just need to get some results showing up here in our window. So let's pull in some additional code. Okay, one step ahead. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to comment out the console log so you can kind of see how this is unfolding. Slim this down a little bit and hide this sidebar. Okay, so now I am going to be mapping over each of the suggestions that come up from the API. And those are going to go into a suggestion list. And inside of the map function, I'm going to create a new div element, just kind of out in space, and set the inner text to the street line, the city, and the state and the zip code. Now I could use destructuring, but this is very self-documenting what's going on to slim this down. And then it returns the element into the suggestion list and then takes the suggestion list and appends it to the suggestion box. And it uses the spread operator to basically break out all of those elements so that they should now display inside the suggestion box. So let me save that and run it. Slim this down a little bit more. We don't have any console logs happening anymore. So now I'm getting some addresses that are showing up. That's pretty cool. But it does have a bit of a problem. It doesn't seem to be erasing anything else. And it's also giving me some kind of an error down here because it's trying to process a blank entry. And so the way I fix that is come up to the top where we are doing our lookup, and we need to copy in some more code to our lookup value area up here. And it basically just says, if I don't have a lookup value, clear out the suggestion box and move on. And that's going to take care of our 422 error down here. So let's just confirm that that is the case. Oh, I should clear off my filter or my console. And it indeed is taking care of that problem. So now I just need to make sure that my suggestions are looking good. So that is simply just adding suggestion box dot inner HTML equals nothing. And that should clear that off. And now we should have some really good address validations. Here we are. So this is basically standing up the SDK example, and that's basically it. So now to move on to the API, what we're going to build on the API side of things, I'm going to close this one down. And now this is our finished API sandbox. This is a little bit more involved. Let me refresh this screen here. And if I start typing, it's got a little bit more going on. It's doing a little bit of a hover or an absolutely positioned box. And when I backspace off of it, it lets the suggestion box go away. Type in some more stuff. If I select an address, it now populates all of the different form elements. So this is what we're going to build for our next demo. So I'm going to go to code sandbox.io, create a new sandbox, get the vanilla sandbox out. This is going to create a new instance or a new code sandbox API area. Let me clear that out, and then I'll add some more boilerplate in our HTML. Yeah. And there's our HTML, and let's get some styles. Styles, and okay, great. So now our JavaScript is all empty and just a raw form that doesn't really do anything except takes input. So we're going to do basically follow the same pattern as before, but the documentation in this instance is going to now go into the Cloud API reference. Now there's no language selection here because we're talking directly to the API, so you don't pull up any kind of another language option. And this is the directions that we'll be following. And so as I go through the next build, it basically follows the same thing. So we need to set up a new key that matches the one for this URL. So I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to add it to this same key. You could create different keys if you wanted to, but I'm just going to use the existing key and add another host to it. Now copy that one. Oh, I might have to copy some more code, so I'll probably be copying this again. Okay, yeah, let's add some JavaScript. And we'll follow pretty much the same pattern as we followed before. We're just going to latch on to the address element and then the suggestion box element, which you remember is hovered over it with an absolutely positioned element. And then we're going to do some adding and removing of classes to when it's active versus inactive. And then we're going to show what that inner text is for whatever search value comes up after we type in the address in that box. So let's see if it breaks. Let's see if it works. And it indeed is working. So that's good. Okay, great. So now the next step is we're going to make a request to the API. So I need a lookup request function. And it wants this Smarty key value, so I better go get that. But I also need to build a constant to hold that. Let's stick that up above here. Okay, so now my key is ready to go, and the send lookup request doesn't have anybody calling it, so I need to add that in as well. And get rid of that bit, because that's, yeah, that was for testing earlier. Now this is getting wired up a little bit better. So now I've got this send lookup request, and now I need to go get the key, and that was over here. Paste. Okay, so now we should be able to console log out any of our address requests. We are using fetch, it's using the async await, and it's using this URL search params. And you can add additional search params in here if you wanted to do some additional filtering, which is described on the website here for all these different input fields. One thing that I did want to show you is I'm going to set the source param to all so that I can get 50 million plus addresses that are beyond just verified postal addresses. The default is postal, but I want to get a little bit more coverage. And these 15 million plus, they are proprietary to our company, so we're the ones that discovered these and found them, and we continue to update them regularly. So, oh, I didn't need to do that. Let's go to our next, oh wait, I was going to show you this part. Yeah, because we're going to be console logging the requests now. So just make sure it's functioning. And we are getting suggestions. So we are now talking to the API. And you can see some suggestions are now starting to show up, which is great. So no errors there. Now we're going to format the addresses in our pop-up box here, our absolutely positioned box. So let's start doing that. One thing that I do want to do is in the send lookup request, is I want to make sure that I'm formatting actual suggestions. So if I have, I'm basically using a optional chain here to say, hey, if I've got a suggestion object and a length object, meaning I've got an array, then go ahead and let's format those suggestions. But I need to create that format suggestions function now. So I'm going to copy that in. And so there's the format suggestions. And again, this is going to be using the same strategy that we used before, basically mapping over each of the suggestions that are coming in and creating div elements to hold each line. And so setting the inner text to each of those items, and then returning that div element back up to the array that's going to capture those, and then appending those to that suggestion element, the floating box, with the spread operator to break out or burst each of the div elements out. So that takes care of that. And I think I had one other bit of code that I wanted to include. Yes. It's this bit right here, and that's going to go up here right after the search value. And this is just to control the styles. So in essence, if I don't have a search value, hide the suggestion box and then move along. If I do have a search value, then show the search box or the suggestion box. Now there's probably better ways to do this with maybe a toggle, but this is simple and it's easy to understand what's going on with just adding and removing classes. So let's see how it works. Let me refresh. And there we go. Now I've got some suggestions that are popping up. And if I back them off, we don't have any errors, and the box disappears like it's supposed to when I don't have a search value. So that is pretty awesome. Now the next step we need to do is, if I select something, I want to be able to populate the fields behind it. So if I click on this, it doesn't make the box go away yet, but I want to click this and then have the city, state, and zip code show up in the fields behind it. So let's get that done. So we need to create a populate form. Well, let's do that, yeah. So I'm going to create a populate form function here. And I want to add some additional code above the append. And so as you remember, when I was typing in here, it would show the suggestions, and then I want to click those suggestions to then populate whatever that suggestion was into the form. So I need to create another event listener, similar to what I did up here for capturing the keystrokes. I want to do a click event listener. So I'm going to add that in now. And so here's the event listener for, oh, I know what I need to do. You guys probably know what's going on. I need to stick this up here, actually. There we go. So when I create the div element here that's floating out in space before it's appended, I need to actually attach an event listener for the click event to hide the box and to send the suggestion into the populate form function down here. So that should take care of that. So let's refresh it and see what happens. And it's now populating the form below. So that is basically wiring up the API. That's it. Now, it looks like we've got a couple of questions here. I'm just going to look at what those are. Do we have examples using Angular or TypeScript? I don't believe we do. You'll want to be able to convert those over, but right now we're just doing everything in vanilla JavaScript. And where would the apartment display? That actually leads into the next bit, and I'll show you where that's at in the documentation here. So as far as that goes, well, let me show you the demo first. So I'm going to go back to the API finished demo. If I put in an address, these fun little code sandboxes sometimes need a little bit of prompting. Okay, so there I've got an apartment, and it says there are 20 additional entries after this. So now I can click on this, and I can go into each of these different addresses, and when I click on them, it will show up here. If I want to show you where that code is, it's a little bit more involved, but the code for this example will be shared. And let me show you what that looks like in the finished example. Yeah, so there's quite a bit more going on here. And this is where we have some secondary handling. And so it wants to detect whether or not there are suggestions. It's quite a bit more involved. So we'll definitely share this with you so you can see how it functions. And as I mentioned earlier, the documentation has all of that information in there for you.
Dave, if I might jump in really quick, this is Wes.
Yes.
It looks like we do have some examples of, it looks like view. And
I do remember that, yes.
Yeah, we've got some examples of, let's see, Vue, React, and Angular. Those three, it looks like, are hosted on GitHub.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. I should have done a little more research before that.
So that's okay. I had to look into it myself. So
yeah, I feel a little isolated on the front end team, so sometimes I don't see everything. Let's see, and then the last question is, you said the curl example on the web page does not work. let me see about that. Could you also share in the chat which page you were looking at? It may be tied to our Smarty Streets branding rather than our Smarty branding, and something may have just changed within the last week or so. So there's quite a bit of sawdust flying still. So if you could just send me the link to, yes, okay, great. All right. Well, that concludes my portion of the demo. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. A quick question here. Does the API provide us with country information?
You'll want to, so we're doing just US address autocomplete. There is international autocomplete. Since I'm still sharing my screen, I can show you what that looks like. So if I go over to some of our address validation APIs, you can see there's an international address autocomplete example. And so you can start selecting like a country. Let's say I want the United Kingdom, and I start typing an address. And you can see, yep, I'm getting definitely some country information coming back. And then there's some information here on that. And so there's the international stuff. If I put a code example in here for, let's say, Australia. Yeah, I don't have my international autocomplete set up, so that's why it's not working for me. If I log myself out, it should show an actual working demo. Any other questions?
Yes. What about county?
County information, I believe, let me just go to local API. So the US Autocomplete Pro has a smaller result set. Let me show you the results that come back. So county is not shown here, but if you need additional data points, you can take the address that you get from a suggestion that is selected, and then you can run that same address through the US Street Address API, and it will pull out a whole lot more information. I think we have I think it's like 40 different data points. In fact, I'll tell you exactly. Let's go to the single address verification demo, and I can start plugging in a sample piece of data. And there's a whole lot of different components that are, so there's additional metadata here. You can get congressional district, longitude, latitude, coordinate precision is rooftop geocoding. So that's one of our other products. Let's see if county is in here. City, default city name, state, check digit, default city name. Not seeing county, but that's probably because I don't know enough.
Yeah, I believe on the web example, we don't give everything in there's up to 45 points of metadata. So I'm guessing it's just showing parts.
Okay.
Excellent. Feel free to continue to ask questions. I am going to take the screen back for a moment, if that's all right, Dave.
Yep, go ahead.
Let me remember how I did this last time. Okay, right here. And then like this. All right, you see my screen? Maybe? Yes, okay, excellent. So three things. I know there's only two on here, but three things. One, if you don't already have an account with Smarty, you can get a free one. That free account will come with 1,000 autocomplete lookups. So if you want to try this out, test it, you can do so for free. Just go to smarty.com, click on free account, and you can sign up for what you need there and try it out. If you don't already have it, you can see how well it works. There's two things left here that, again, feel free to ask questions as you need it. After this webinar ends, it'll close and a little survey will pop up. Please fill out that survey. It's going to ask you if you enjoyed this, if there were things that you wish you had learned, and ideas for future webinars, that will help us make sure that we're providing quality content for you. So please do complete that survey at the end. Now, this webinar was about how to make sure that you've got solid, clean, accurate data coming into your address database, making sure that it's super easy for your users. They can start typing in their address and it will autocomplete the correct validated address for you and put it into your database clean. There's a good chance, though, that you already have a database that is filled with address data that may or may not be valid or have been validated. We're going to be doing a webinar on February 24th. And in that webinar, we will talk about how you can use our tools to scrub essentially a current database and make it clean. It is going to be really fun, really clear, and I think you guys would enjoy that if you have an address database already. I'm looking through here. I don't see any other questions, so I'll just say thanks a whole bunch, Dave. This has been very, very useful. Like I said, we did record this, and we will be sending a copy of it out to everybody who registered.